Namaste, everybody. I am doing a live today on one of the questions that I was seeing a lot in some Reddit threads related to being single and childless, not by choice. So I thought I'm going to get on and talk a little bit about it. The question is, does it get better? And I'm going to assume I know what it is. And I cannot tell you how often this was in the threads. People really just wanting to have some reassurance and somebody telling them, don't worry, hang in there, things absolutely get better. So I'm here to tell you, as somebody who is single, I am not married, and as somebody who is childless, not by choice, I am probably more like child-free, not by choice at this point, because even if I could have kids, which I cannot for multiple reasons, I don't think I would pursue it at this point. And I went through it in terms of the grief around it. So I'm actually shocked that I'm even saying that. But to answer the question, does it get better? Yes. Hell yes, it gets better. It doesn't mean that I can tell you when it gets better. I can't tell you how long it takes to get better because everybody is different. I can't even tell you that it's going to be a linear path up. It's not. It's going to be like this. And getting better doesn't mean that there's not going to be times that don't suck as well. What I can say in terms of getting better is I'm able to think ahead, feel hopeful, feel less anxiety around what the future will look like, feel like I have self-worth outside of being a mother. So if that's what you're looking for, yes, you will begin to feel like you can live your life again and that it's not going to be some second rate or like B-side life. I did write down a few things that I think are, oh my God, Gavin's going to roll with this dog coming next to us. Relax, relax, relax. He did it. I did write down some things that I think are important to say about this topic and some just things to reassure you if you are somebody who wakes up and wonders, is this ever going to get better? All right, so yeah, it will get better. I don't know when, but it will. And one of the ways in which it gets better is you'll start to develop some responses, not only to other people, but also some things that you'll talk through in your own head when you start to feel like people are being a little bit intrusive with questions, or if you're in an uncomfortable situation. I know that when I was really in the deep, deep thick of it, if somebody asked me, do I have kids, that felt very raw and difficult. And I can tell you now, when somebody asks me if I have kids, I'm much more comfortable answering that question because I kind of have a way in which I answer it, which I just say no, and then I let the silence hang there if it needs to. If anybody says anything rude, like I think the most recent thing somebody said to me, and this was a couple of years ago, I will say, is it's like, oh, do you have kids? I say no. And they say, oh, do you want mine? And I kind of bluntly respond and say no. And that is something that I think took some time to get to. And it doesn't ruin my day. Like, I don't think about it for a really long time. I'm able to kind of, just like any other interaction with somebody, right? I'm able to not hold onto it and hold it tight. So that absolutely gets better. The other thing that gets better, and I don't know if this just comes generally with age, But I don't care as much what people think. And back in the day, I think I would think, what must people think of me? I wonder what questions they have. They must think I'm uh, like a complete loser, or they must think nobody wants me, or like things like that. And now I don't think that way. It doesn't matter to me as much what other people are thinking about me. Again, I think some of that is just generally with age. But ultimately, what I was also able to work through around that is I was able to really understand and recognize that those thoughts were just the things that are kind of projected onto us as somebody who is single, as somebody who is childless, not by choice. It is about, um, it is, those are things that like society says and wonders. And so therefore my brain was telling myself those things too. So I was able to recognize that and detach myself from that. And that I thought was very helpful. Like, actually, I don't know that people are really thinking so much about my situation. I think a lot of people are thinking about their own situation. Not that people aren't. I know people do are like, why is she single? Why doesn't she have kids? I wonder what her story is. But I do kind of tell myself that I think it's a little bit more based on curiosity. Um, Sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong about that. But um, being able to not really care what other people are thinking couldn't come at as a better time too, because I do, people who are in like the really deep thick of the grief, when the politics was going on about like childless cat ladies and things like that, I felt really bad for people who were really absorbing that, and really were extremely hurt by that. Yeah, so I'm seeing some people asking about my dog. And this is Gavin. He's my Great Dane. And he's my buddy. He and I are like this. He is a Merle Great Dane. Most people ask me that. They also ask me how old he is, and he is 4. So the next thing that helps get better, yeah, he's so there's some people walking by, and so he's like wanting to let people know I'm seeing you. But he's not mean. He isn't mean. He's a big old sweetie. He's a little protective because he's the first dog I've ever had, and so I've made some parenting errors, but he's not mean. He's super sweet. He's a Great Dane, so they're big, but they're big cuddle bugs. And so, yeah, he's a cutie. But yeah, he's a big boy. Okay, so the other thing that gets better is you are able to start to rethink the possibilities of what your future can look like. I think many of us who are childless, not by choice, one of the really difficult parts of the grief is you're grieving all these things that you thought would happen that aren't. And it's a grieving non-events, which I think is particularly difficult. It's the disenfranchised part of the grief. I just did a short on that recently. And what gets better is instead of getting really stuck in the place of all the things that won't happen, you start to be able to consider new possibilities. One of the reasons I think that we struggle in this area at first is because there's not a lot of representation and there's not a lot out there about what can it look like to age, be over 40, not have children, and maybe not be married. And because there's a total void in that, It's scary. I mean, it's really scary. And the things that are out there aren't all that great. You know, there's a lot of negativity toward it. There's definitely a societal push to have people have kids, right? And partner up. And so there's things that just kind of like steer you in that way. Yeah, right now you are the only person here, Elizabeth. I usually have more people watch it as a replay. All right. So building the life that you want does start to happen a little bit at a time. It's not something where one day you just wake up and you're like, oh, I can do all of these things. It may be for you, but for me, it was something that's kind of happened a little bit at a time. I just read the book and we just did a book club book on The Next Happy. And she talks about how as you're going through the grief, little sparks of interest start to form. And when you start to feel a spark of interest, then kind of lead into that and go into that. And that is consistent with what happened with me. Is I started to think, well, maybe I'll do this. And then I was able to do that little by little. And it was like, you know, when you like pull a thread and you're like, this thread keeps pulling. That was similar, or how that happened. I will tell you, speaking of my boy Gavin, getting him was absolutely something that helped it be better. He is looking at a bunch of people walking around. I am parked on the side of like a street, and he is watching. There's like an outdoor mall place up a little bit further, and so he's watching everybody walk by. It's a gorgeous day. I'm in Florida, and it's beautiful today. It's not too hot, and so there's a lot of people walking around. I thought I'd hop it on this live right before work. Okay, a couple of other points that I wanted to get across here. Oh, I will tell you, when you do start to have those sparks of interest, I felt more relief initially than like joy or happiness or things like that. So I will tell you that relief and sort of like neutrality, or like just a little bit above neutrality, is how I felt about that first. Okay, I always kind of include this next step or this next point when people talk about the possibilities and the life that you can have. Is, you know, I'm of a generation where the single and childless women, the representation was like Sex in the City. My life is in no way similar to anybody on Sex in the City. And if you're expecting your life to be this sort of glamorous, single life around that, just be hesitant. I'm not saying you can't have that or cultivate that if that's what you want, but it doesn't mean there's no responsibilities. It doesn't mean you have an endless supply of money. It doesn't mean that there aren't still life things that happen to people, and that you're having to work through and manage and deal with. It also, you know, I think one of the like things that I'm most envious about with regards to Sex in the City has nothing to do with their lifestyle, but just the fact that there was 4 of them. And whenever somebody went through something or their lifestyle started to look a little bit different, there was somebody else in the group that they were able to kind of relate to and do things with. But just remember, you're still adulting. And I know you know that if you're single and childless, not by choice, but sometimes it can feel like our life needs to look a certain way based on what our lifestyle is. You know, some people who have certain jobs, they feel like they have to project a certain like affluence. And I think in lifestyles, sometimes that happens too, but you don't. All right, the last thing I just want to emphasize is that this is not a linear path upward in terms of getting better. It's up and down. This is just like any other grief out there in terms of that path. And it can take a while. I like the grief, like the depth of the grief process for me was years. Now, did I feel like horrendous for like the entire process? No, but I did have some years where I was feeling like, what is the point? Like my entire life is getting blown up. I have no idea what life will look like in the future. All these milestones that our society is centered around, I will not be participating in. Like it is a cluster to try and untease all of that. What I will say is that if I can be answering the question, does it get better? And I'm able to answer yes, then I'm telling you, you can too. One of the things that I sometimes worry about is that I come on here and it seems like I'm doing really, really well. And I am. And there's a reason I decided to start this channel. And that's because it comes from a place of really struggling with this for a long time and wanting to be able to kind of be some of the representation that I talk about, but wanting to show the whole spectrum of those things. So just to, I see a lot of people looking for reassurance, and I was desperate for reassurance as well. And yes, it can get better. One of the books that I think helped me in terms of some representation around that is No One Tells You This by Glynis McNichol. It's a memoir. We just did a book club on that one too. But she's single, she doesn't have kids, and she's living in New York City, and it just is a memoir about her life and her perspective. So I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. We got to roll. There's somebody walking by us, Elizabeth, so you might be seeing Gavin just kind of stare someone down. Relax, Gavi. Yeah. I forgot where I was going. Anybody ask me about my dog and I get totally distracted. I've got to go to work. Okay. It was nice to meet you, Elizabeth. Thanks for asking about the pup. And watch on the next live. I have, let's see, I did loneliness 2 days ago. Does it get better? I did today. The next two on my lists are, so you are childless not by choice, what now? And also, what is your life like? So I have those two. And let me know if you'd like to do others. There's a lot of crud going around, Elizabeth. I hope you feel better soon. And hope to see you for the next one. Gavin and I, we say bye. I hope everybody has a great Thursday. All right. He's done too.